So good evening, everyone. It's really nice to see some familiar faces and not so familiar faces. And I feel really happy that we have this opportunity to spend the next week immersing ourselves in compassion. So it's going to be like a compassion immersion course. I think it'll feel really good. So let's start with a few minutes of just settling down. Some of you may have been traveling to get here today and might be a little unsettled. So we'll settle down, and then a motivation. I'll lead a motivation for this session, but also for the retreat, to put ourselves into as positive a state of mind as possible. So bring your awareness into this room in case it's somewhere else. And bring it into your body. And see if you notice any tightness, tension anywhere in your body. If you do, try your best to let go of it. You can imagine it melting and flowing out of you, sinking into the earth, or just evaporating in space. Try to let your body be as relaxed and light and free of tension as possible. And then be aware of your breathing, the natural rhythm of your breath flowing in and out. Just observe that for a few minutes to let your mind settle down. If there are any thoughts in your mind not related to what we're doing here, put them aside. You can always pick them up again later, but really try to resolve that you will keep your mind, your awareness here on what we are doing and not wandering elsewhere. And being aware of the breath is a good way of settling the mind in the present, the here and now. So our motivation for the things we do is very important. It's one of the main factors that determines what kind of results or consequences will come of our actions. And it's best if our motivation is a positive one, especially altruism, meaning caring about others. So we all do naturally have a certain amount of care and concern for others, feelings of love and compassion, wanting to help others. But those kinds of feelings are not always present all the time for everyone. But we can work on them and grow them, cultivate them further so that we can feel them more often and for more people and beings. So get in touch with that kind of feeling or attitude. You can remember a time when maybe you saw somebody who looked like they were having a hard time and your heart felt moved, touched by seeing their suffering, and you felt the wish to help them, or at least for them to be free of their suffering. So bring to mind some experience like that where you did feel compassion or love for another person or another group of people. So that state of mind, quality of compassion is really beautiful. It's good for ourselves, it's good for others, it's good for the world. And it's an essential quality in the Buddhist path, whether one wants to attain liberation or full enlightenment, Buddhahood. Compassion is something we need to develop, and we can do it. So that's what we're going to be focusing on during this retreat, looking at ways to develop and increase our compassion as well as other positive qualities, love, joy, equanimity. So, as I said, these are good for ourselves. They're a source of happiness and peace for ourselves here and now, and also in the future. But the real purpose, the real reason for cultivating these qualities is to benefit others. So everyone, all people, all living beings want happiness, good experiences, and nobody wants suffering, bad experiences. So being aware of that and respecting that, and then wanting to do whatever we can to help others, to help them find happiness and be free of suffering. This is actually the best motivation that we can have for learning and practicing the Buddha's teachings, the Dharma. And the highest level of that altruistic attitude is what we call bodhicitta. This is the aspiration to become fully awakened, fully enlightened, a Buddha, following in the Buddha's footsteps, doing what he did, becoming a Buddha, so that we can then help all other beings in the best possible way. So if you're familiar with that notion and comfortable with it, you can bring that into your mind as your reason, your motivation for being here and joining this retreat. You can think, I'm here to create the causes for enlightenment, to bring myself closer to enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. But if that notion is unfamiliar to you, or you're not quite sure if that's really what you want to do or what you're able to do, then you can have some other altruistic intention, such as, I want to learn ways in which I can be more helpful to other people as well as to myself, and make that your motivation for being here, joining this retreat. So using your own thoughts, your own ideas, what works best for you, what feels right to you, generates some kind of positive, altruistic reason or motivation for being here tonight and also for joining in this retreat. So what we're going to be doing for the next week is we'll have some sessions of the practice of Chenrezig. Specifically, this version of Chenrezig, because there's many different forms of Chenrezig. This is known as the Four-Arm Chenrezig. And we have numerous pictures, images around that you can familiarize yourself with to get to know how to do this practice. So tonight I'll explain the practice that we're going to use. It's quite a short practice that's found in all the traditions of Tibetan Buddhism. And so part of the retreat will be involved with that, doing this practice of Chenrezig. But there will also be, I'll give talks, and there'll be meditations on how to develop bodhicitta. And specifically, I thought to use the 7-point cause and effect method of developing bodhicitta. So we'll go through those 7 points, and you'll have the chance to meditate on each one. And if there's time, I would also like to go through a short text by Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna is one of the greatest Indian masters of Buddhism. He lived just a few hundred years after the Buddha. And he's mostly known for his texts on Madhyamika philosophy. He wrote texts about emptiness, according to the Madhyamika perspective. So he's kind of famous for that. But there's this other little text that is called, the short title is Dream Tale, or the longer title is Tale of a Wish-Fulfilling Dream. And it's all about how to cultivate loving kindness for others, for sentient beings. So it's really, really beautiful. And it shows another side of Nagarjuna that we may always be aware of. Yeah, there's a tanka on this wall here of Nagarjuna. So tonight, I'd like to give an introduction to Chenrezig. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Chenrezig, but some may not be. And when you encounter Tibetan Buddhism, you can't help but notice that there's many, many deities. We call them deities. There's probably thousands, hundreds of thousands when you really look into it. So whenever you visit a Tibetan Buddhist temple or monastery, you'll see paintings and statues of these different deities all around. And I think we naturally wonder, who are all these deities and where do they come from? And I think for Tibetans, they grow up with these images, probably from the time they open their eyes. You know, they see paintings and statues, and they see their parents and their grandparents and their neighbors and everybody else making offerings to them and praying to them. And when they are taken to a temple or a monastery, you know, again, there's all these images, and then they bow and they pray and they make offerings. So I think from the time they're little kids, Tibetans are exposed to these deities and are told, oh, these are Buddhas, you know, they are holy beings and they can help you, and all these positive things. So I think for them, they probably have no doubt or no mistrust or any feeling like that about them. But we have a different experience, most of us. We grow up in families sometimes of a totally different religion, Christianity or Judaism, no religion at all. And it's only later in life, maybe when we're in our 20s or 30s or 40s, then we encounter these deities. And I think it's natural for us to wonder, maybe be a little suspicious as well. So one thing we need to understand is that these deities, even though they do use the word deity, and I think even in Tibetan, the word la is used, which is sometimes translated, well, the meaning of that is God or deva. But they are not like the kind of gods that you find in, say, Greek mythology or Hinduism, where they have like a whole pantheon of these different gods and goddesses and stories about them and all the adventures they get up to and so on. So the Buddhist deities are not like that. They are emanations or manifestations of enlightened mind. So enlightened mind is something we all have the potential to attain. It's the mind that's totally free of everything that is negative, disturbing, harmful, faulty. So all faults, all negativities have been totally eliminated, eradicated, and will never arise again. So it's a mind that's completely pure in that sense. And all the positive qualities of the mind, like love, compassion, wisdom, patience, and so on, all these good qualities of the mind, they have been developed to the highest degree possible, like totally perfected and ever present and on all the time. So it's the highest, most perfect, most pure state of mind that is possible. That's putting enlightenment in a nutshell. And we all have the potential to reach that state of mind. That's really what Buddhism is all about, showing us how to develop that potential and reach enlightenment. But there's already lots of beings, such as Shakyamuni Buddha, who have attained that state of enlightenment. And anyone who reaches a state of enlightenment, they're not limited to having just one body like us, you know. We have this one body, two hands, two eyes, two ears. So even when we want to help others, we are limited in what we can do. But enlightened beings don't have such limitations. It's said that they are able to manifest, to emanate in as many different forms as they want at the same time. So they can be all over the place, all over the universe, helping sentient beings in different forms, suitable to each person's disposition. So, you know, people are different, beings are different. So what's helpful for one person may not be helpful for another person. So an enlightened person, an enlightened being, is able to see what would be most helpful for this person and what would be most helpful for that person. And so they will emanate in different forms according to the needs of different people and different beings. So that's the origin of all these different deities. They're all manifestations or emanations of enlightened mind, appearing in different forms to help different kinds of people and different kinds of beings. So that's a lot to understand and maybe accept as well. But that's just, the brief version of that. And so that's really what Chenrezig is. Chenrezig is a manifestation of enlightened mind, fully purified and fully developed mind, appearing in this form. And the specific form of Chenrezig is compassion. Chenrezig is said to be the embodiment of the great compassion, the, vast and unlimited compassion of enlightened minds. So that's his kind of particular quality. But that doesn't mean that even if he is the embodiment of compassion, he doesn't have the other qualities. So every enlightened being and every emanation of an enlightened being has all the excellent qualities, all in the enlightened qualities. But they have, kind of a speciality. This is their speciality. So for Chenrezig, it's compassion. And by visualizing Chenrezig, praying to Chenrezig, it's to help us cultivate our compassion. We already have compassion, but it's limited and not as well developed as it could be. So we do the practice of Chenrezig to help ourselves increase our compassion, have more compassion. And then another deity is Manjushri. Manjushri is said to be the embodiment of the wisdom of all the Buddhas. So that's Manjushri's speciality, is wisdom. So those who want to cultivate wisdom will visualize and do the practice of Manjushri. So let's move to the next. I thought some of you might be more curious about Chenrezig and want to know more information about Chenrezig. So I did a little research and I'll share with you some of what I've learned. So Chenrezig, that name is Tibetan. That's the Tibetan name. And he has different names in different languages. So in Sanskrit, his name is Avalokiteshvara. In Chinese, it's Kuan Yin. In Vietnamese, Quan Am. Is that right? That's what Wikipedia said. And then I was also kind of pleasantly surprised to find out that even in Asian countries where the predominant form of Buddhism is Theravada, they also have statues and images of Chenrezig or Avalokiteshvara that are, in their temples and monasteries and so on, and people pray to them and worship them and so on. So in Sri Lanka, he's known as Natadeva. And in Thailand, Lokeshvara. And Myanmar, Burma, Lokanath. So Chenrezig or Avalokiteshvara is quite well known in Asian countries, especially Eastern Asia, like China, Japan, Korea. He could be one of the most popular deities. And these different names, the name Chenrezig, that's the Tibetan name, as well as Avalokiteshvara, the Sanskrit name, those two names have the sense of one who is looking at the world and all the living beings and has awareness of all the suffering. So like constantly looking at the world and sentient beings with compassion, wanting to help us. And the name Kuan Yin is slightly different because of the way it was first translated when Buddhist teachings were translated from Sanskrit into Chinese. It was translated in this form, which has the meaning of one who hears the cries of the world. Hearing the cries of the world. But either way, it has the sense of someone who's very much aware of the world and all the living beings, isn't distancing himself, going off and just blissing out in nirvana, but totally awake and aware of the world and all the living beings, in particular suffering, all the cries of suffering, all the sadness and pain, physical, mental, and so on, and totally concerned about helping sentient beings to be free of their suffering. And in Tibet, Chenrezig is particularly well known and popular. He's said to be the patron deity of Tibet, and a number of the early kings of Tibet were considered emanations of Chenrezig, and also the Dalai Lama, all the, up to now, 14 Dalai Lamas, they have also been considered emanations of Chenrezig. And some other lamas as well. I think Karmapa, His Holiness Karmapa, is considered emanation of Chenrezig. And Tibetan people, they do the practice of many different deities, but this is probably the most popular one, Chenrezig. And the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum is recited probably thousands, millions of times every day by all the Tibetans. And if you wonder if Chenrezig was a historical person like the Buddha who lived in this world, I don't know. I was trying to find some information about the origin of Chenrezig, and I did find a couple of stories. One is in a book by Bokar Rinpoche. He's a Kagyu Lama. It's called Chenrezig, Lord of Love. And there it said that Chenrezig arose from a beam of white light emitted by Amitabha's eye in Sukhavati Pure Land. So Amitabha, it's another well-known Buddha, popular Buddha, and Amitabha abides in this Pure Land called Sukhavati. And again, he's totally dedicated to helping sentient beings. So at some point, a light came from his eye, and then from that light arose Chenrezig. And there's another story in a book called Power of Mantra by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and that account says that he appeared in a lotus in another Pure Land, which is called Pema Choling. So it said that, in these Pure Lands, there are lakes, and in the lakes grow lotuses, and sometimes beings are born in these lotuses or appear out of these lotuses. So that's another story about the version of the origin of Chenrezig. So anyone who wants to read those stories, there, we put some books in the Kuan Yin room over there, and so there's some books where you can learn more about Chenrezig if you're interested. And there are different aspects of Chenrezig. I'll show you a picture a bit later of 108 different aspects of Chenrezig. And some of these are male, some are female, some are peaceful, some are wrathful, and they are in different colors, sometimes with different numbers of heads and arms and so on. And in one sutra, the Lotus Sutra, this is a Mahayana Sutra, chapter 25 of the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha was asked about Avalokiteshvara and why he's called by that name, the one who, sees all the beings in the world. And the Buddha's talking about his qualities. And one of the things the Buddha says is that the Chenrezig will appear in any type of form, whatever will be helpful to sentient beings. So for some, he'll appear as a Buddha. For others, he'll appear as a bodhisattva, or he may appear as a hearer or a solitary realizer. These are practitioners of the Theravada tradition, or a monk, or a nun, a layman, a laywoman, a boy, a girl, and even a non-human being. So maybe that includes kittens and puppies, cute little animals to help us generate compassion. So, yeah, so this is one of the qualities of Chenrezig, appearing in many different forms. So not always in this form with one face and two hands. And then there's another question. Is Chenrezig a Buddha or a Bodhisattva? And in some of the Mahayana sutras, Chenrezig appears as a bodhisattva. For example, the Heart Sutra, which we recite here every day, right? This is probably one of the most famous sutras in Mahayana countries. So in the Heart Sutra, the main figure is actually Avalokiteshvara. He's doing most of the talking, giving the teaching. And he's referred to as a bodhisattva, bodhisattva, mahasattva. And and a few other sutras where he appears is the Lotus Sutra and the Avatamsaka Sutra. And in those sutras, he appears as a bodhisattva. But it seems in Tibetan Buddhism that he is considered a Buddha. So one of my teachers said that there's a group of 8 bodhisattva disciples of the Buddha. And they're actually, all 8 of them are actually Buddhas themselves. They're fully enlightened. But to assist and support the Buddha, when he was teaching, they took the form of bodhisattva disciples. So that's how perhaps it's understood in Tibetan Buddhism. So Chenrezig really is a Buddha, but will sometimes appear in the form of a bodhisattva if that is beneficial. So I don't know. I'm in no position to say he's a Buddha or a bodhisattva. That's just what I've heard, what I've learned. But then when it comes to our own relationship, how should we relate to Chenrezig? So there's a book by Venerable Sangye called Cultivating a Compassionate Heart. I think it's some teachings she gave during a retreat on Thousand-Arm Chenrezig. This is another form, the one above my head. That's another form of Chenrezig. So I think she once led a retreat. Were you at that retreat? She led a retreat. Years ago, yeah. So she led a retreat on that practice of Chenrezig, and then the teachings were made into that book. And so in that book, she says that we can relate to Chenrezig in different ways. So one way would be to see Chenrezig as someone who has accomplished what we strive to accomplish, what we aim for, which is awakening, enlightenment, to benefit all living beings. So we can see Chenrezig as someone who started off like us, an ordinary being, but then cultivated bodhicitta, this loving and compassionate attitude towards all living beings, wanting to help all of them have happiness and be free of suffering, and then followed the bodhisattva path, became fully enlightened, and then is now fully enlightened and is able to work for the benefit of all beings. So we can think of Chenrezig as, in that way, as someone who has done what we wish to do. Another way we can relate to Chenrezig is as an embodiment of awakened qualities. So we can focus on all these wonderful qualities, especially compassion, infinite, unconditional, universal compassion, plus all the other qualities like wisdom, understanding the true nature of everything, loving kindness, patience, and so on. So all these excellent qualities, which again, we ideally, following the Buddhist path, we want to develop those qualities in ourselves. And we know that we can do it. And we can relate to Chenrezig as kind of showing us what's possible for us. The third way we can relate is to see Chenrezig as the manifestation of the enlightened being we will become. So again, like showing us what is possible for ourselves, kind of like a mirror of our own potential, which we can work to develop and perfect and eventually become just like that ourselves. So you can think about these and maybe try them out, see which one you're most comfortable with. You could also, if you feel more comfortable with Shakyamuni Buddha, if you have been visualizing and meditating on Shakyamuni Buddha and feel very comfortable with Shakyamuni Buddha, you could think that, well, Chenrezig is basically just like Shakyamuni Buddha. He's no different. The outer form is different, but the inner qualities of Chenrezig are exactly the same as Shakyamuni Buddha or any other Buddha figure that you're comfortable with, like Tara or Manjushri. We should try not to discriminate and think, I like that one, but I don't like that one so much, because they're all equally enlightened and have the same excellent qualities. And the whole purpose of doing practices where we visualize them and meditate on them and do recitations and so on, the whole purpose of that is for us to get in touch with those same qualities in ourselves and feel, I can do this, I can become like that. And helping us develop those qualities. So if these ideas are unfamiliar to you, if you're just learning them for the first time or even the second time or the 10th time, and you're still feeling unsure, how do you understand these? How do you relate to these? That's fine. They are unfamiliar to us. They are not things we are taught when we are growing up in our families and in our education system and so on. So they're quite new. And it can take the mind time to get used to these ideas and understand them and then be able to assimilate them. So give yourself time and just think about them, contemplate them. If you encounter doubts or questions, you can ask them. There'll be opportunities during the retreat for discussion and question and answer. So ask your questions. Try not to just get stuck in your doubt. And also don't think, oh, this is such a dumb question, or this question may sound disrespectful, I shouldn't ask it. Don't worry about that. We all go through the same kind of process of, what does that mean? What is that? And it's important that we ask our questions and get answers to them rather than just having them circling around in our mind and maybe causing us to be uncomfortable. So we shouldn't get stuck in our doubts and our questions. Instead, we should try to clear them up. So ask your questions, and also it's good to read more, study more, and think, reflect on these ideas. And gradually they do become more clear and you can make sense of them. And another thing about the meaning of Chenrezig, recently His Holiness the Dalai Lama was in Ladakh and he gave an initiation of Chenrezig, Thousand-Arm Chenrezig, this one. And when he was giving the initiation, he said that the ultimate Chenrezig is the good heart, wanting to benefit sentient beings and to not harm them, to not despise them or look down on them, and instead to always have the thought to help and be kind to them. So if we're inspired by that, if we think, yeah, that's the way I want to be, I want to have that kind of attitude of caring for others, not being nasty to them, hurting them, but helping them as much as I can. So that's what Chenrezig is all about. So the practice of Chenrezig will help us to develop that good heart, that kind heart. Okay, so next. Yeah, so this is a picture I found of the 108 aspects of Chenrezig. It's not very clear, but just to give you an idea that it comes in many different forms, colors, and so on. And they're all for the benefit of different kinds of people, different kinds of beings. It's like, kind of simple example or gross example, like different people like to eat different kinds of food or wear different clothes or have different religions. You can't say that every human being should eat this kind of food or follow that religion or wear this kind of clothes. That wouldn't work. Or listen to the same kind of music. So we're different and we have different needs, different dispositions. And so to help us cultivate our potential and our good qualities, the Buddhas will manifest in these different forms. And so for some, a more peaceful aspect like this one works, but for others, a more wrathful one. Some of them are kind of wrathful looking, dark blue and fire coming out of their heads and so on. So that will work for some people. So they're all for the purpose of helping sentient beings, different kinds of sentient beings. Okay, but we're going to focus on this one. So let's look at the symbolism of Four-Arm Chenrezig. So I got this from Bokha Rinpoche's book. So Chenrezig, this version of Chenrezig has one face. This other one, the one with 1,000 arms, has 11 faces. So it's a little more complicated. So one face. So the one face represents the essence of all phenomena, meaning all phenomena on the ultimate level have the same nature, which is emptiness of inherent existence or true existence. So conventionally, we and others and all phenomena have different characteristics. We're all different. But when it comes to the ultimate level, meaning the final mode of existence, the actual way that everything exists, on that level, everything has the same nature, which is emptiness of existing independently or inherently or truly. I'll talk more about that later, but I know many of you are familiar with it. But that emptiness is said to be the one taste, the one nature of all phenomena. So that's what's represented by the one face of Chenrezig. And then the 4 arms represent the 4 immeasurable thoughts, which are loving kindness, like the prayer we did at the beginning. Loving kindness, wishing all sentient beings to have happiness. Compassion, wishing all sentient beings to be free of suffering. Joy, wishing all sentient beings to always have pure and perfect happiness up to enlightenment. And then equanimity, wishing all sentient beings to be unbiased, to be free of a biased attitude where we like some people and we dislike other people and we don't care about everybody else. So we'll be looking at those 4 measurables and doing meditations on them as we go along. The 4 cats of the Abbey are named after these 4 measurables. Is it Karuna, Maitri, Upekkha, which means equanimity, and then Mudita, which is joy. So we have constant reminders of these 4. Then this form of Chenrezig is seated with his legs in the Vajra, or full lotus posture. And so the two legs crossed in the full lotus posture represent the union of compassion and wisdom. So those are the two main qualities that we need to develop to progress towards enlightenment. Compassion is caring about sentient beings, wanting to help them, and doing what we can to help them, giving, being patient, and so on. And then wisdom, understanding the true nature of things. How does everything exist? How do I exist? How do sentient beings exist? How does the world exist? So the true reality of all these things. So those are the two most essential aspects of the path. They're compared to two wings of a bird. A bird can't fly if it has only one wing. It needs both wings to get off the ground. So in a similar way, we can't reach enlightenment if we have only compassion but not wisdom, or if we have only wisdom and not compassion. So we need both of those, and they need to be united. So that's what's represented by the crossed legs. And then his first two hands, you can go to the next page. First two hands in front of his heart, he's holding a jewel, which is called a wish-fulfilling jewel. And so this represents his bodhicitta, his aspiration to help all living beings, fulfill all the wishes of sentient beings. And then his other right hand, on the right side, he holds a mala, a rosary, prayer beads. And Bokku Rinpoche says this represents he's drawing all sentient beings to liberation. It made me think of a cowboy using a lasso to catch wild horses so as to subdue them, tame them. So maybe, this is my own idea. Chenrezig wants to catch sentient beings in a totally non-violent way, of course, just out of compassion and love, but to catch them and draw them in to the path so that they start progressing towards genuine happiness and peace and ultimately enlightenment. And then the lotus in the other hand, the left hand. So the lotus is a kind of classic Buddhist symbol of how enlightened beings can be in the world and still maintain their realizations and their purity, not being affected by or stained by the world. Because the lotus is said to grow in a muddy pond. It can't grow in clean water, I guess. It only grows in a place where there's a lot of mud. But when the lotus comes up above the water and opens up, it's totally pure. There's no mud on the flower itself. So it's a symbol of that enlightened mind. You start off in the world with all the muck, all the mud of the world, but you rise above that and have a totally pure mind. So holding the lotus symbolizes that Chenrezig is in the world, working to help sentient beings, but he's not affected by the delusions, the afflictions, the faults, the craziness of the world. He's able to stay pure of those. And then this curious thing, I can't see it so well in this painting, but Chenrezig has a deer skin over his left shoulder. And I always wondered about that. I'm sure many people do. It's like, what, did he kill that deer and he's wearing it? So it's not like that. He would never do such a thing. But the deer, it's said that there's this type of deer that is very compassionate and willing to sacrifice its life, and does sometimes sacrifice its life to help others. So there's stories probably in the Jataka tales and Buddhist legends about this kind of deer sacrificing its life to save others, to help others. So having that deer skin over his shoulder just, again, is another symbol of his compassion and his kindness. And then he's also wearing like jewelry and silks, and these represent his excellent qualities, his inner qualities, including wisdom and patience and so on. And that's something I also had trouble with when I first started encountering these deities, because in our world, wealthy people like to have jewelry and precious jewels and very expensive clothes and so on. So it's kind of a sign of, I don't know, a sign of greediness or materialism. And also, to procure these jewels and silks and so on usually involves some harm to other sentient beings. I mean, that's definitely the case with silk. That comes from silkworms. They have to be boiled alive to extract the silk and make that into clothes. So it's not at all compassionate. And then the mining of jewels and so on usually involves some exploitation of economically deprived people. So we shouldn't think like that, because the jewels and silks that Chenrezig or any of these deities are wearing are not those kind of things. They just spontaneously manifest as a result of their inner qualities. So they're more like, I mean, when we visualize these deities like Chenrezig, we're visualizing them as made of light. So the whole visualization is just pure radiant light, so that it's not, their bodies aren't, flesh and blood and bones like ours, and likewise their silks and jewels and so on are not ordinary ones like the ones found in our world, but they're all representative of the inner qualities, the excellent qualities. And then the white color of his body is the symbol of being totally pure, free of all obscurations. And I was a little unsure about bringing this out because some people may find it offensive to associate white color with purity, because of, all the problems with racism and so on. But this has nothing to do with human races, which anyway are just a fabrication. They don't actually exist, because they find that we're all like 99.99% the same genetically. So race, the idea of different races was just some invention by certain human beings. So deities being white color or red color or black color has nothing to do with those kind of races. And in Tibetan Buddhist iconography, the different colors of deities are associated with different types of enlightened activities. So white is associated with peacefulness and things like pacifying sickness, causes of untimely death, and so on. So, for example, white Tara, there's a number of deities that are practiced for long life, overcoming obstacles to your life, and those are usually white. Not always. There's Amitabha as well, he's red. But anyway, white is often associated with practices for long life and overcoming sickness and so on. And then the color yellow, some deities are yellow. That's related to the increase of good qualities that we need for our Dharma practice. And then red, the color red, red deities is associated with control, or sometimes it's called power. And this means removing obstacles to our Dharma practice and gathering conducive conditions for our practice. And then there's deities that are either black or dark blue, and that's associated with wrathful activities, using forceful methods to accomplish activities for the sake of enlightenment when other means don't work. So with some beings, they're quite hard to deal with. Intractable, I think is the term. And if you try peaceful means or other means, they don't respond, doesn't work. So sometimes you have to be strong, like with your kids or students. If if they're misbehaving, you talk to them sweetly and say, "Please, please don't do that," but they keep doing it. Then you have to talk a little louder, a little stronger, and finally you may have to yell, but not with anger, but because you want to help this person, this child. So in some cases, we do have to be more forceful. So that's what the black or dark blue colors represent. And as we saw in the picture, Chenrezig does manifest in all these different forms. There's red Chenrezigs and yellow Chenrezigs and black Chenrezigs and so on. So they're all just different manifestations of that mind of compassion, wanting to help sentient beings and appearing in different forms that they can relate to, that will get through to different types of sentient beings and help them, especially to develop their potential. It's similar with the 21 Taras. That prayer is recited every morning, right? Breakfast. And 21 Taras are 21 different manifestations of Tara, and they also are in different colors: red, yellow, white, green, black, and so on. And they, again, serve different functions, helping sentient beings in different ways. There's actually a connection between Chenrezig and Tara. There's one story about the origin of Tara, that she arose from a lotus growing out of a pool of water, or tears, actually. Chenrezig was crying because he'd been working really hard to help sentient beings, and then he kind of looked around and saw there was still so many sentient beings who were suffering, and he just started crying, and his tears formed a pool of water, and a lotus appeared, and it opened up, and there was Tara inside, and she said, "Don't worry, I'll help you." That's even one of the verses. I think one of the verses in the 21 praises, lotus born in an ocean of tears from Chenrezig, through world's protector. Yeah, so they're connected. Okay, so that's about the symbolism of Chenrezig that might be helpful for you. Some people like to know, why is he holding this, and why is he looking like that, and why is he wearing this? So it is helpful to know. All these things mean something. So I was thinking of going through the sadhana. Do you have the copies of the sadhana here? So this is the practice that you'll be doing starting tomorrow morning. And there's many different versions of sadhana or practice related to Chenrezig, and some are very long and complicated. This one is short. And this particular one was written by a yogi named Tangtong Gyalpo. He lived in the 14th, 15th centuries, and he was non-sectarian. He didn't belong to any particular... Could I have a copy if there's one? He didn't belong to any particular Tibetan tradition, but studied with all of them, and meditated. Didn't just study, but meditated, and became quite accomplished meditator. And he was very, very compassionate and wanted to help people. And he would help people in very practical ways. Like, he was a doctor, and he built monasteries, and he also built bridges. He's known as the bridge builder, because he built 58 iron bridges, because, there's lots of rivers in Tibet, and a lot of them are pretty wild. The snow melts, and then it's raging down, and people need to cross rivers. So he would build bridges to help people cross rivers. And apparently some of those are still existing and still being used. And yeah, so he's the author of this practice. And the practice itself, the portion he wrote is actually very short, and then we are free to add other prayers to it. So we did add a few prayers to this one. So I'll just briefly go through the practice because you'll start doing it tomorrow. And it starts with refuge and bodhicitta. That's like the same prayer that we recited at the beginning tonight. So this involves taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I hope everyone is familiar with the meaning of refuge. If not, I think there are some materials in the Kuan Yin room that you can read to know more about it. But this is basically recognizing that the Buddha, the Dharma, his teachings, and the Sangha, which strictly speaking refers to those who've directly realized emptiness and are Arya beings, but in a more conventional sense, it refers to those who are seriously following the path, like monks and nuns. So we often use the term Sangha to refer to ordained people, monastics. So recognizing that these three objects of refuge have qualities that we admire, respect, and want to emulate, and so we want to take them as our guides in our own life, in the way we live and practice and develop ourselves. And then the second part of the prayer is bodhicitta. So there we aspire to become enlightened, fully enlightened, for the benefit of all sentient beings. And to actually become enlightened, we need to practice the six perfections, or here they're called the far-reaching practices. So that's giving, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. So those are the six main practices of a bodhisattva, or someone who aspires to become a Buddha. So we make this kind of promise that we will generate bodhicitta and do those practices in order to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So there's a lot to that prayer, but I don't want to spend too much time. And recently when His Holiness was teaching in Ladakh, he talked about this prayer, and he said that it shows two kinds of refuge. They talk about causal refuge and resultant refuge. Causal refuge, it's also sometimes called outer refuge, because we are taking refuge in external objects, like the Buddhas, those who have already become enlightened, the Buddha, and then the Dharma, his teachings, his realizations, his attainments, and then the Sangha, those who are seriously following this path and maybe already reached certain levels of the path. So those are the external objects of refuge. And that's called causal refuge, because these are the causes for our own attainment of enlightenment. And then resultant refuge, or also called inner refuge, is we ourselves have the potential to become Buddha, to become Dharma, to become Sangha, to become objects of refuge for others to follow. And this is what we aspire to do. We don't want to always be a follower, relying on Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha for help, but we want to reach a point where we have accomplished the highest goal, and then we can serve as a source of refuge for others, an object of refuge for others. So there's that future resultant Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha that we ourselves will become. And he said the second part of the prayer, where it talks about practicing generosity and the other far-reaching practices, and then becoming a Buddha to benefit all beings, that's talking about resultant refuge, or inner refuge, our own Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha that we want to develop and attain. So when doing this prayer of refuge and bodhicitta, in this particular practice, you can, if you wish, visualize, you can visualize the Buddha and surrounding him all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as your objects of refuge. You can also visualize Chenrezig as the object of refuge, and again, surrounded by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. If you have difficulty visualizing, you can also just think that there are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas out there. In fact, it's said that there's always these beings, fully enlightened beings, Buddhas as well as Bodhisattvas, who are totally concerned about us and ready to help us. They're around us all the time. We can't see them because of our karmic obscurations, but they are there ready to help us. And so it's not like we have to go to some special place to meet Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. They're already in front of us, wherever we are all the time. So we can just think of them, bring them to mind, and then direct our prayer of taking refuge to them. The second is the four immeasurables, as we recited earlier at the beginning of the class tonight. So again, the four are loving kindness or love, wishing all sentient beings to have happiness and its causes. And then the second one is compassion, wishing all sentient beings to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And third is immeasurable joy. Here it talks about wishing all sentient beings to not be separated from sorrowless bliss. So one way I've heard that explained is wishing sentient beings to not just be happy right now, but to have happiness continuously in the future, in all their future lives, up to the time when they are free of samsara and have reached nirvana, enlightenment. And then the fourth is equanimity, wishing all sentient beings to have equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. So most of us, most sentient beings, have these attitudes of attachment. There's certain people and beings that we really like and we're attached to, and we want to stay close to them and want to keep them close to us. And that gets very sticky and leads to lots of problems and suffering, because we can't always keep ourselves close to others or keep them close to us. There's inevitably a time when we have to part, separate, and then it's very painful when that happens. So we're setting ourselves up for suffering when we have attachment. And also when we have attachment to some people and beings, it's inevitable that there's going to be other people and beings that we don't like. They don't please us. They don't do what we want them to do. They don't look the way we want them to look. So when there's attachment, there's naturally aversion for whatever is opposite to that. And so that's the other attitude: aversion, dislike, anger, hostility that we feel towards those that we don't like. And they don't do what we want them to do, and they do what we don't want them to do, and so on. And so, yeah, our mind just keeps swinging back and forth between these two extremes: attachment, really liking some people, and aversion, I can't stand that person. And that's not a peaceful state of mind. It's not a positive state of mind. And so we wish all sentient beings to be free of those swings of mood and emotion towards other people, and instead have equanimity, which is not indifference. It's just seeing everyone as equally deserving of our respect and our concern. So we're not shutting anybody out of our love. But seeing, everyone deserves my love and my compassion. It's hard to do that, but we'll start looking at that tomorrow, because that's the first step in the development of bodhicitta. We have to start by, working on It takes a while to achieve it, but we have to at least start working on becoming more equanimous ourselves, and then we can help others do the same. Okay, then there's the visualization. So it says, above the head of myself and all sentient beings, as infinite as space, is a white lotus and moon disk. So when doing a practice like this, it's good to imagine yourself surrounded by all other beings, that you want them to benefit from the practice as well as you. And so, it's hard to visualize, and certainly all sentient beings who are countless in number, we can't possibly actually visualize all of them, but to just have the feeling that they are there, wishing that they could all be there, sitting quietly and peacefully and doing this practice along with us and getting the benefit of the practice along with us. So if that's not too uncomfortable for you, then it's good to try that. And so above the head of everyone, it's above, so it's not like sitting right on top of your head, squishing you down, but a little bit above, there's a lotus, and it's a lotus with the petals flat, spread out flat, white lotus, and then in the middle of the lotus is a moon disk, flat, luminous disk of light. So everything, the whole visualization should be seen as light, made of light, transparent. You can think of a rainbow. That's a good example, because when we see a rainbow, it can appear really bright and even solid. Like, you can almost think I could go up there and touch it. But it's not. It's just an appearance, and it's transparent. So ideally, that's how you visualize these deities. And so then in the center of the moon disk appears this syllable Hri. That's the seed syllable. Every deity has a seed syllable. It's just a Sanskrit syllable. So you can just visualize those letters, unless you know the Tibetan. You can visualize that. So the Hri appears, and then that transforms into Arya Chenrezig. So he's often referred to as Arya Chenrezig, Papa Chenrezig. Papa. That's the Tibetan term for Arya. And then it describes his body's made of white light, radiates light of 5 colors. So there's like rainbows of light going out from him in all directions. He's smiling. His face is peaceful and smiling. His eyes shine with great compassion for all beings. He has 4 arms, the first 2 together in front of his heart, holding a wish-fulfilling jewel. And then on the right, the other hand holds a crystal rosary, and on the left, a white lotus. So you can look at the pictures and statues and so on to make yourself familiar with how he looks. And then he's wearing garments of celestial silk, ornaments of precious jewels. And then here it says an antelope skin. So that's that compassionate animal. And his head is crowned with Buddha Amitabha. So it's not always easy to see, but there's a little figure of Amitabha above the top of the head of Chenrezig, also with Tara. Tara's also has. So this shows that they are in the lineage of Amitabha Buddha. Amitabha Buddha, you can think Amitabha Buddha is their guru, their spiritual teacher. And they have him on their head out of respect. His legs are in the Vajra posture, and he rests his back against a stainless full moon. So there's usually a kind of aura around deities. So you could think of like the full moon, very bright and white around him. He is the essence of all objects of refuge. So all Buddhas, all Dharma, all Sangha, so all the objects we take refuge in are embodied by this one figure of Chenrezig. So I can see that we won't have time to go through all of this tonight. Following this is the 7-limb prayer of mandala offering, and then a prayer of praise. And then I'm just going to skip, we can finish tomorrow, but I'll skip over to the recitation of the mantra. So the mantra is Om Mani Padme Hum. It's not very difficult to learn. Not like Vajrasattva mantra with 100 syllables. Or there's also a long Chenrezig mantra. I haven't counted. Do you know how many syllables that has? The long one, Namaratnatraya. Yeah, there's a really long one. There's even a longer one in the Chinese tradition. Tapetso? Yeah. Really long. Yeah, so we don't have to do those. We're just going to do the short one. Om Mani Padme Hum. And so there's a visualization. So over on the top of page 3, it says, having prayed single-pointedly in this way, infinite rays of light radiate from Arya Chenrezig's holy body. This light shines on oneself and all sentient beings, purifying all impure karma and delusions. The outer realm becomes the pure land of bliss, Sukhavati, and the body, speech, and mind of oneself and all beings become the holy body, speech, and mind of Chenrezig. All visual appearances, sounds, and awarenesses become inseparable from emptiness. So this is actually a tantric practice, part of Tantra. And in Tantra, if you've received the appropriate initiation, which I think some of you have, if you've received the initiation of Avalokiteshvara, like the one that His Holiness gave recently, then that gives you the permission to visualize yourself in the form of Chenrezig. This is called self-generation. So if you have received that initiation, then you can do that visualization. You imagine the light purifying yourself and you dissolve into emptiness, and then you can imagine yourself in the form of Chenrezig. But if you haven't received that initiation, you cannot do that. But what you could do is just think that I have the potential, and all the beings, all the sentient beings in the universe, we all have the potential to become just like Chenrezig, to have the same qualities, enlightened qualities, compassion, wisdom, and so on. And so you could do that kind of way of thinking while doing the mantra. So this is what you're supposed to visualize while reciting the mantra, while reciting Om Mani Padme Hum. Imagine the light going out, purifying everyone and everything and every place, and the whole surroundings become Sukhavati, pure land, very beautiful and pure, and all beings become enlightened beings. But you can just think all beings have the potential to become enlightened beings, including myself. And this practice that I'm doing, this visualization and recitation of Om Mani Padme Hum, is to help bring that about, to purify whatever is in the way of our attainment of enlightenment and create the causes and conditions for our attainment of enlightenment. So that's what you could do while reciting the mantra. And I think, Venerable Disciple, you already talked to them about counting, keeping track of the mantras. Yeah. So that's optional. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but if you wish to, then you can, keep track of how many malas. Does everyone have a mala? Everyone have prayer beads? Keep track of how many malas of the mantra that you do. And then I think in the Kuan Yin room, there's a place where you can indicate the number of mantras. And then these will be all collected together and added to, there's people all over the world who are doing this kind of practice and accumulating mantras. And I was reading about Tangtong Gyalpo. He's the one who initiated this kind of retreat of doing 100 million Om Mani Padme Hums. Because Lama Zopa Rinpoche said it was a tradition in Tibet. So he's the one who started that tradition. And yeah. So whatever little numbers we are able to do, it's making some contribution to that. And all the collection of Om Mani Padme Hums is dedicated to world peace and the long lives of our precious teachers like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and so on. But you can also make your own dedications. If you, I'm sure we all have people we know who are sick or maybe dying or maybe have died recently or experiencing other kinds of problems, mental problems, emotional problems, relationship problems. There's so many problems. So you can think particularly of the people you know who need special help and special prayers, and even visualize them. Visualize them right there in front of you as you're reciting the mantra, and visualize them doing the mantra as well, getting the benefit, the blessing of the mantra. So in each session of the practice, there'll be a certain amount of time, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It depends on how long the session is and how much time the leader wants to give for the mantra recitation. So you'll have time to do that visualization while reciting the mantra. And then at the end of the practice, there's dedication of merit. So we've run out of time. I did have more to say, but I'll finish tomorrow, carry on tomorrow morning. Any questions?
You said the forearms represent the four immeasurables. Do you know which arm represents which?
I didn't get that detail. Maybe you can make your own.
So in the kind of three different ways to relate to Chenrezig or any of the deities, when we say that, for instance, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is an emanation of Chenrezig, is it then relating to Chenrezig in that first situation, thinking that yes, that Chenrezig is a person who attained Buddhahood?
Well, I think, you might get different answers to that. I'm sure Tibetans believe that His Holiness really is Chenrezig in human form. You have no doubt about that. And there's a story about Khandrila, this special Tibetan woman. And I think when she came out of Tibet, made her way to Dharamsala, and the first time she saw His Holiness, she saw Chenrezig. She actually saw the thousand-armed Chenrezig. So yeah, there are, I'm sure, people who have that kind of experience. It's always been a little tricky one for me, coming from my background and my karma and so on. But like I said, there's probably different ways of understanding it. But on the other hand, if you can accept that Buddhas, enlightened beings, do have this ability to manifest in any form at all, even as dogs or as trees or as, whatever, then why not manifest in the form of teachers? In fact, that's the most important kind of manifestation that we need, because we need to learn the Dharma. So we need teachers who can actually explain to us the Dharma and also show by their example how to practice the Dharma. So that is really the more important and beneficial way that the Buddhas can manifest. So if you think in that way, then of course it makes sense that someone like His Holiness and other lamas would be emanations of the Buddha, of Chenrezig. And there's something else I was going to say, and now it's gone. Yeah, it'll come back. Henry, do you have a question?
Venerable, what's the meaning of the 5 colors?
There's a lot of symbolism in Tantra about the 5 colors, like the 5 Dhyani Buddhas. Each Dhyani Buddha is a different color, and each color has some different significance. I can't remember all the details of it, but yeah. And I think, too, sometimes in different contexts, the colors might have different representations. In one context, white may mean this, in another context, it means that. So I have to say, I've never paid too much attention to that kind of information. But yeah, it's a frequent imagery. Those 5 colors: white, red, blue, yellow, and green. Yeah, so like prayer flags and different decorations they have, they use those 5 colors. I'll see if I can find something. Okay, so I thought tomorrow I'll talk a bit more about the sadhana, the practice, and also start talking about the methods for developing bodhicitta, because in each session there'll be meditation on this sadhana of Chenrezig, but also some analytical meditation on some aspect of cultivating love and compassion and bodhicitta, so that we know how to, because it's not enough just to visualize Chenrezig and recite Om Mani Padme Hum and suddenly our mind will be full of compassion and love. It doesn't work that way. We also have to use specific methods for getting in touch with our compassion and then expanding it, increasing it, and learning to feel it even for the ones we have difficulty with, the ones who may be doing harmful things to ourselves or to others. And, compassion may be the last thing we feel for them. So we have to learn how to have compassion for everyone. But it takes time. So slowly, we work gradually on that. But yeah, so we do need to do analytical meditations or contemplative meditations to learn how to increase our compassion and be able to extend it to more and more people and living beings. So that will be a part of the retreat as well, doing those meditations. Okay, so we'll stop there for tonight and dedicate the merit